focusing on opening and closing the lips. I decided to split the tutorial into 3 parts instead of 2, because it turned out to be way longer than expected. The third part will cover expressions and corrective shape keys, but for now, let's begin with fixing those sticky corners.
First, start by opening the mouth to its maximum, depending on your character. Then, play with the orange handles to create a better open mouth shape. You can move and rotate them around. You can also adjust the weight painting if needed. Once you're happy with your pose, add a transformation constraint to one of the handles, targeting the jaw controller.
Transformation constraints can allow you to move, rotate, or scale a bone, using a transform of another one to control it.
Unlike the copy type of constraints, you can use the location of a bone to control the rotation of another, for example. It doesn't have to be on the same axis either.
To avoid this tutor getting too long,
The map to values need to go in the min or max slots. Depends on what you entered in the map from values.
add a location suffix at the end of the constraint's name, because you'll need another one for the rotation. Set the space to local.
For the map from value, it may change depending on what type of jaw controller you're using. In this case, I grabbed the Z location value of the controller when the jaw is open to the maximum and pasted it to its corresponding slot in the constraint.
Since I'm only using the Z axis of the target, I changed all the source axes and changed the map to type to rotation.
Change the rotation mode of the bones from quaternion to Euler, so you can copy and paste the rotation values to their corresponding slots in the constraint.
Copy and paste the location values as well.
Once it's done, you can reset the transforms of the bone.
Repeat the process for the other orange handle.
It'd be better if we could control both corner tweakers at once.
But parenting them to a single parent would conflict with the open mouth shape we just made.
So instead, duplicate them to create intermediary bones.
Give those a light green color. Parent the corner tweakers to them. Duplicate the top tweaker and scale it up to create a master tweaker. Parent it to the corner controller. Then, parent the green bones to the master tweaker. Since we still want the tweakers to be affected by the orange bones, add a copy location to the green bones, targeting their corresponding orange handle.
Set it to local space.
If you want, you can add a copy rotation in local space as well.
Personally, I don't think it's needed.
I realized I forgot to name the 3 new bones, so let's do it now.
Symmetrize the corner.
It's now basically finished.
The last thing will be to link the corner controller to a master controller.
Do you remember those yellow corner bones that we parented to this big bone inside the mouth at the end of the part 1?
Well, I realized while reviewing the setup in preparation for this part 2 that they were in fact absolutely useless.
They're remnants of my old lip rigging technique, in which the corner of the mouth wasn't separated between top and bottom. So let's get rid of those. Now let's make a master controller to move the whole mouth around. Duplicate the top controller and place it at the middle of the lips.
Because we can't directly parent our controllers to it.
The bottom one still needs to follow the jaw, and as for the rest, moving the controller around would deform the mouth quite badly. When you encounter a situation where you need a bone to approximately slide along a surface, or to be restrained to an arc-like motion, parent.
In the case of the lips, it would be the back of the mouth, where we already put the big parent bone.
Duplicate it to create a first tracker bone. Snap its tail to the master lip controller and parent it to the big bone.
Put it in a tracker collection. Next, duplicate it twice.
We want additional trackers for both top and bottom. Parent the bottom tracker to the jawbone and the top tracker to the head bone.
In pose mode, remove their constraints.
Let's also bring the big bone into the tracker collection for convenience.
All those collections are temporary anyway. They're just here to help make things less confusing. Same for the colors.
So let's color code the trackers.
The middle bones will be blue, the top bones red, the bottom ones green, and the master controller yellow.
Now, the blue and green trackers will need targets of their own, while the red one will track the master controller. Extrude a little target out of the blue bone and duplicate it.
Make the duplicate green.
The blue target will be parented to the big bone.
We want it to always stay at the middle of the mouth while following the master's movements.
Same story for the green tracker, except we want it to go down with the jaw, so let's parent it to the jawbone.
Our top and bottom lip controllers will need a few constraints later on, so let's create intermediary parents for them by duplicating them.
Parent the controllers to their respective new bone, and parent those new bones to the tracker of the corresponding color. Then parent the corner controllers to the blue tracker.
Track constraint to each tracker. They're tracking their respective target, except for the red.
Add a copy transforms targeting the master controller to the blue target and set it to local.
That way the target can follow the master while still being moved around by its parent. Copy the constraint to the green target. We can now move the lips around.
I like to be able to rotate the mouth on the y-axis.
To make this possible, let's add a copy rotation to one of the tracker, targeting the master controller.
Place it above the damped track and disable every axis but the Y to avoid issues.
After that, copy this constraint to the rest of the trackers, always putting it on top of the damped track.
We'll use the master controller to control some expressions later on, but for now, let's move on. Now to create this pinching mechanism, it's my unzip them to create phoneme shapes. The lip crease, corner.
In pose mode, reset the length of the stretch to constraint and replace the targets of both constraints by the corner controller. Replace the end handle as well.
Select the green bones and do Ctrl+A to apply selected as rest pose again. Rename all those new little guys. So the idea will be to have the yellow intermediary bones snap to pinch targets that will be linked to our new pinch chain. The character, they could stay here or be moved closer to the middle purple chain. Then parent them to their respective green bone, shared by both top and bottom.
The middle ones are parented to the blue bone.
You can move them to the pinch collection. Let's not forget to rename them, swapping INT by pinch in their names and resetting the numbers.
Finally, parent the blue bone to the tip.
Parenting to the blue tracker, that is itself parented to the big bone with the armature constraint, will ensure the pinch chain always remains at the middle of the mouth, while still being influenced by the master lip controller.
Let's bring the green intermediary corner bones in the INT collection for convenience. Now, add a copy transforms to the yellow bones, targeting their respective pinch bone. Same thing for the green corner bones, except they'll both target the master corner tweaker instead. Another thing I like to do is to rename those new copy constraints to something like close or closing, to further indicate their specific purpose. You can batch rename if you hold Alt while hitting enter. Now, duplicate the corner controller to create a pinching controller. The placement doesn't matter at all. I like to put it near the corner, in front of the face. I orient it so that it points toward the mouth. Let's give it a proper name. After that, parent it to the big blue bone. Find it easier to use when its movements are restricted. You can lock all the channels except for the Y location. Find a maximum Y position that you like. The lips will be fully set to 0, while the maximum Y value can be the one you just chose. It needs to be set to local and to have effect transform sticked on. You can now symmetrize the whole thing. Now let the fun driver stuff begin. We want our pinch controllers to influence the close constraints on our yellow bones. I'm not a math person, so I set it up in a way that I found easy, using only simple operations. It starts by creating 2 custom properties, one for each side. I normally have a designated property bone in my rig, but in this example, I'm going to add them to the master leb controller. You only need to change the name and put the max value to 3. Those custom props will affect the close constraints more or less pinching because they never separated. So since I had 3 columns to deal with, I made my custom props range from 0 to 3. Those props need drivers of their own. Right-click on one and choose a driver. The variable object will be your armature. For the bone, pick the corresponding pinch controller. We're interested in the Y location channel of the bone, in local space. Make sure your control variable by whatever number that gives you 3. It's okay if it goes beyond 3 a little bit. Once it's done, you can copy the driver and paste it on the other prop. Right-click on the left prop and copy its data path. We'll use it as a variable for the close constraints driver. Add a new driver to the influence of the first yellow bone's close constraint. Change the variable type to single property, choose the armature as the object, and paste the data path in there. Rename the variable to pinch, because we are going to add another one later. The expression will be different for each column of bones. For the first column, just type pinch for now. You can then copy the driver and paste it to the next bone. Here, you only need to change the expression to pinch divided by 2. For the last column, it gets a bit more complicated. Duplicate the variable using the copy and paste options, and rename both variables to pinch-L and pinch-R. In the data path of the pinch-R variable, swap the L at the end by R. Normally, the variable would have been divided by 3, but since we have 2 in this case, let's add them together and divide the result by 6. I just realized that the bottom green corner bone was facing the wrong direction due to the copy transform targeting a bone with a different orientation. Let's replace this constraint by a copy location instead, still targeting the master tweaker. It'll work perfectly. I usually don't have this issue because I make the bottom chain face the corner instead. I guess that's what I get for forgetting to do it in this tutor too. You can now paste the driver in the influence of this new close constraint. For the expression, just multiply pinch by 1.5. It'll make the corner close faster. To test the pinching mechanism, copy and paste the drivers from the top row to the bottom one, and vice versa. Bone 2. I want this new controller to shut the lips close when it's scaled down. And since I find scales hard to work with in drivers, The other duplicated bone will act as an intermediary mechanism, allowing me to use the location in the driver instead. Next, give a transformation constraint to the mechanism bone, targeting the orange controller. Set it to local space. We want the bone to move by 1 meter on the Z-axis. The axis itself doesn't matter when the orange controller reaches a scale of 0.5.
I don't like to go below 0.5 when using scales to control stuff, because it can be a quite sensitive transform type on small bones, and it makes seeing the controller harder.
Of course, you do not have to use the scale. It's just my preference. Let's edit our drivers. Open one of them and add a new variable. Rename this one close, for example, and change the type to transform channel. Object is your armature as always, and the bone will be the close mechanism bone. Change the type to Z location in local space, since it's what we used in the transformation constraint. In the expression, add plus close after pinch. The driver will now work whether you use the pinch or the close controller. Copy the variables and go paste them in another driver. Remove the extra pinch variable. We only want to keep close. If pinch is either multiplied or divided, put the expression into brackets before adding plus close. Repeat for all the drivers of the top row. After that, copy and paste the modified drivers to the bottom row. You now have two different functioning closing systems. Symmetrize the bones again for good measure. Since the drivers can't be symmetrized, you can copy those from the left side, paste them on the right side, and simply replace L with R in the data path of the pinch variables. Here, I only do it for the top right row, so I can then transfer them to the bottom right row. The second part of this tutorial is now done. Let's meet again for the third one. Please leave a like and subscribe if you found it useful. Cheers!